Hello, Power Painters. This is Taylor Payton of tapeart.com and powerpainters.org coming to you today with another Power Painters video. So in this video, I am continuing the Drawing Your Character series that I started when this YouTube channel hit 10K subs, and I was just kind of taking people's characters from the comment section of that video after it was put up for like the first 72 hours or 5 days or something, I think I said, and sort of drawing them. So I've drawn three so far, and you can check those out, previously to this video in the YouTube channel box thingy, or you can just go in the description box because I'll link them all up in there. But basically, this character comes from Ayobanus 7. Uh, Ayobanus 7, I think that's how you say it. And they commented a link to their Instagram account where they had this picture on the right of that particular character, whose name I think is Killua because that was in the hashtags, but there wasn't one in the description, so I'm just going to go with that. Anyhow, it looks like he has sort of a suit that would put him in an organization. It has an emblem on it. It looks kind of like maybe a school or a sports uniform. And clearly his power is lightning. So I decided I wanted to do sort of a dynamic sketch of that. And so that's what we're going to be kind of covering today. Again, I'm using this fairly quick process wherein I don't do a whole lot of painting. It's just more of a shaded style, and it's fairly drawing based. So as you know, once I like to establish that first initial drawing, we go in with our more certain version, and I end up doing a lot of editing on this version just because I kept trying to get away from like the DBZ thing because with yellow bright hair we're thinking Super Saiyan, right? And it's really hard to avoid that because it's become so emblematic after Akira Toriyama did it. But I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think that it looks cool, and if you don't overdo it, it's a pretty interesting aesthetic to run with. So basically, I'm just roughing in the face, trying to figure out how I can capture the most character and where I want the character to be looking and stuff like that. So I probably messed with this face a little too much, to be honest. I don't know what it was. Like sometimes I have a fairly solid foundation and I'll just keep overworking it. It doesn't happen too often, and usually it's not like I create something that is like just completely devastatingly worse than the previous version. It's just I'm used to creating so many versions that sometimes in hindsight I'm like, oh, number 6 was better than number 8. You know what I mean? So it still turns out solid. The piece still turns out pretty cool, but sometimes I get a little unsure of my own process and I'll just keep on reworking stuff when that's unnecessary. Other than that, I'm really happy with how the pose sort of turned out. As you can see, there are some dynamic angles in the arms. I wanted to really emphasize those arms and hands for this particular piece, along with sort of the intense look on the face. And we also have the just sort of the simple kind of shading style that you're going to see coming into play, and I start to indicate where the shadows are going to go before I even lay in any colors by doing it in line. So it's just all comes back to drawing principles, when we're thinking, what are my types of lines I'm going to use, what are the angles of the pose that I can really exploit, and how can I use just some quick mark making to indicate where I'm going to be placing shadows and how are those shadows going to further define the forms that the character is going to be showcasing in this particular piece. So yeah, this one came together pretty quickly. I think the full version of the image took me, I want to say, an hour and 6 minutes. Aside from the face, I didn't second guess a whole lot. I mean, you'll see me go through some iterations and such, but really this one was fairly easy just because the design is nice and simple. I really like that about Ayobanus's design. It just feels, succinct. There's not a whole lot of bells and whistles. It's just a character with some stark yellow hair shapes mixed with kind of this, like I said, sort of a uniform kind of aesthetic going on. I'm using that word too much, aesthetic, kind of a uniform design. And I say that because there's a degree of symmetry to it, but there's also asymmetry where you have sort of that demonic face over the heart, and then you have, 4 bands on that same left side, as opposed to 2 on the right side. So that shows that the character isn't completely symmetrical, and symmetrical designs can kind of be boring sometimes if they're not done right or if it doesn't fit the character, even when it comes to uniforms, which are typically, they err on the side of symmetry. So It's just a design decision that you want to make when you're working on your characters and your pieces. Is the character very balanced? Do you want it to feel very symmetrical? It's the same way, like, would you make a very symmetrical illustration to convey a certain element of equanimity, or having a good sort of pull between the left and the right side of the canvas, or the top and the bottom. We basically are always working in a rectangle unless you're doing something, in a circle or a diamond shape. So there's, an infinite amount of ways to subdivide that plane. And when you want something more dynamic, you subdivide it diagonally. Diagonals tend to feel much more dynamic and not necessarily stable. They're not as certain as, straight vertical lines, whether those are horizontal, or, like I said, vertical. But straight lines in a diagonal fashion still convey a certain amount of structure while still maintaining that energy to them. And that's why I keep it fairly fairly crisp when I'm doing this sort of stuff, because I want to make sure that there's a lot of diagonals, and a lot of those diagonals are fairly straightened out, even though, his outfit is reading like an outfit, because I'm not doing it too straight. If it's too straight, if the lines are too straight, it gets a little blocky, a little constructive, which can really work if you know how to do it right. But other times, that can really work against you in a lot of ways if you're not careful. So, really, it's all about just making those decisions. Here's where I go in and start mucking with the face more than I should, moving stuff around, making sure his expression is maybe a little bit more, I guess, conveying a little more character. He had sort of a stoic face before, and I wanted something a little more like upturned, a little more, not necessarily completely snarling, but if you're activating your power, you might have to like exert yourself a little bit. So that's why his brow is furrowed and his eyebrows are turned down at an angle. And you see, I drew lines in the sort of keystone between the eyes. And I redraw the nose a couple times because I wasn't super happy with the one that I drew initially. And I think I do like the second nose better. Anyway, flipping the canvas, all that good stuff you see me usually do to, check the structural integrity of a drawing. And now we're adding some gradients. And gradients are your friend when you're not trying to do a whole lot of blending or waste a lot of processing power. After the gradient comes in for a backdrop, then I just start adding the colors of his outfit. And since I had actually lost the PSD file I was using to reference the character, I just keep on jumping back to the recording program, ScreenFlow, and looking at the character in there, just so I didn't have to open up another Photoshop document and go and find the image and all that. You want to make it as easy as possible for yourself to hit flow while you're working. So just, have a nice big cup of water. Make sure you've gone to the restroom. Set aside 45 solid minutes at least, if you can, and just make it easy on yourself to really get in and make it happen. Because when you're directing yourself and there's nothing, no forces outside you impelling you to move forward, then it can be quite the task to make yourself do something, especially if it's more involved in a sketch. That's something I'm always working on, and stuff I hope to bring insight in or into in regards to the channel moving forward. Speaking a little bit about the channel, because you pretty much know what I'm doing here. It's just the lasso tool with some paint bucket fills, which is Command Shift F5, I believe, or just Shift F5 or Control F5 if you're on Windows. Is it just Shift F5? Shift F5. Yeah, like I said, it's so ingrained in me at this point that I don't really examine my shortcuts. But it's either Shift F5 for a fill, or it's Control F5. But I'm pretty sure it's Shift F5. So once I have all my colors filled in and I change the color of the lines just to give it a little more interest, so they're not pure black, then I start adding some shading and cleaning up what I have established already. And you can see there's already a lot more character to it outside of the sketch by adding these new elements of line and drawing in some crazy lightning energy around him that I was just sort of sketching in and zooming around randomly so you could feel like lightning-esque vibrations coming off of it, because lightning sort of has a tendency to jump in veiny kind of positions. And so I'm just thinking how it would wrap itself around his body as he's charging and emitting it. So if he's the transistor in this case, then he would have the lightning, kind of dancing around his being and bouncing off various parts of his skin and outfit. So that's sort of what I wanted to convey, and I just used like Gaussian blur and color dodge to play with the lightning and darken the background so everything sticks out a little more because he's fairly mid value. The lightning's a little higher value, so a dark background is really going to do this one justice, right? Yeah, but overall, I've really been having a lot of fun on the characters when I get the chance to do it. Unfortunately, I was slowed down because my Mac laptop, the 2013 Mac laptop that I have done pretty much every single Power Painters video on, is starting to act up on me a little bit. The enter key, the return key slash enter key, I'm sad to say, no longer works. And that makes it very difficult to paint because the whole right side of the keyboard is kind of going numb and dumb. I've ordered a small, like, replacement keyboard for the time being, but if parts of it are already going, I'm concerned for the rest of its longevity. That's why at the end of the video, I have something to talk to you about in terms of creating a stronger, more wholesome degree of content and value in Power Painters. And so we'll wait until the very end to discuss that stuff. But for right now, basically what I'm doing here is I'm just going and adding a little bit of extra light, a little bit of extra potency. I'm not using, a ton of paint in this particular style. I'm keeping it all very cell shaded, very simple value separations. But because I know the fundamentals and I know how to push the value numbers around, I can create these distinctions in the character and have it seem sort of a little more epic because of that extra lighting I added. Basically, it's just a multiply layer with the opacity tuned down to the level that I want, and that's why it feels like part of him is in shadow because the other part is just sort of raw and in light. So once I add shadow, you just infer that the rest of it is light because of everything on the picture plane is relative. And I go into a lot of this stuff in the beginner painting course and the beginner drawing course. So if you're interested, you can just look into those. Those will be in the description box waiting for you. But if you hold off on that, I will give you a promo code at the end of this video so that if you do want to grab those lessons and understand, these simple basic fundamentals that you can use and apply to increase the potency of your creative process, then I will talk more about that at the end of the video. But yeah, that pretty much wraps up Killua here. I want to thank Aobanes for submitting this character. It was a lot of fun to work with. He had a very simple, straightforward design that made it very cool, and I got to, free up my mind on the design part and think way more about the pose and the effects and the lighting scenario. So this one turned out pretty nice, I think, for just an hour, you know, give or take 6 minute sketch. And I want to thank you for watching this far, and I hope that you learned one or two things as you do every single video, because that's why I'm making these, so I can share this process with you and hopefully give you some insight into how you can just keep on increasing the power of your own process. All right, so last but not least, I want to talk to you about Power Painters Operation Alpha. Now, Operation Alpha is basically my campaign to turn Power Painters into something bigger than it already is. You know, if you've been with the channel for a while, that I've been doing this sort of in my spare time as part-time work, just making videos here and there as much as I can, but I want to take this to the next level. And while the Patreon campaign isn't quite set up yet, it will be later. The first step, I believe, is just to see if I can acquire enough funding to really upgrade my equipment, get the necessary software, and have enough money to work full time on this as opposed to, say, freelance or doing modeling and acting gigs. I really sincerely feel like we're building something special here, and I want to cut out a lot of my focus in other areas to make Power Painters grow for the sake of artists everywhere, for the sake of creatives everywhere. I've thought about it for a while, and I want to distill it down to creative empowerment, allowing artists to make more independent income from not having to, work too assiduously for other companies or causes that are not their own internal worlds that they're trying to express forward, and have mastery of the craft to manifest. And that is what Power Painters is going to become, and I need your help to do it. So basically, Operation Alpha, I'm going to be live streaming myself painting on this guy as funding goes up. It's actually higher than 131 right now, and once we hit 200, I can buy Camtasia, which is the software I will use to record and edit videos on my PC as opposed to my maybe dying laptop. And the PC videos will be higher quality, higher resolution because it's 1920 as opposed to 1280, and that I think is already a big step. And I will have more funds to actually, put my heart and soul into this as opposed to just sort of make it a side thing. Because as you know, you have to concentrate as much energy as possible into something in order to see the greatest results. That's just basic. It's almost a universal principle. The more you scatter yourself, the more you allow yourself to kind of capriciously pursue other things in a manner that isn't sincere and isn't, just paved by your blood, sweat, and tears and your very heart and soul on a plate, then it's going to be lacking in some capacity. And I don't want power painters to be that. So if I could get your assistance, you can use the code ARTPOWER to get 20% off anything in the Power Painters Gumroad store. All those links are in the description box below. If you want to watch the live stream, my Twitch stream account is also in the description box below. I will be streaming as many nights as I can, painting on this guy. Like I said, as funding goes up, hopefully I can find a way to set up like a way to talk while I do that, because I'm very new to streaming and I just want to keep increasing the potency of not only my own art, so I can distill that process down and give you all of the power with none of the mistakes, but also just find more and more ways to make this viable, because what I don't already know, I can learn and I can document that process. And hopefully, for some reason, people feel really inspired when they watch these, they listen to them when they draw, and I really feel that it's time to just see the growth that I've sort of envisioned for not only the channel but this whole like power painters thing. So if you would really do me a favor and read the post that I'm linking to in the description box, it explains Operation Alpha in more detail. Or if you just want to get those courses, like I said, the code ARTPOWER is in the description box as well, along with the Gumroad store. And last but not least, if you don't want any courses, I've opened up donations for the very first time, just letting you know how sincere I am about this. And people have already donated. We're actually, like I said, higher than 131. We're at almost 200 right now. So I will be able to get Camtasia and video quality will go up, which I am super excited about. So thank you from the bottom of my heart for all your support thus far. And if you have some extra capital, you would like to see this evolve so that you see those videos show up in your subscription feed more often and you know that the quality is going to be higher, then by all means, I am making that as easy as I possibly can. So all the stuff, like I said, is in the description box below. Thanks for watching another Power Painters video, and I hope to make many more awesome ones for you in the future. Until next time, Power Painter, happy creating.